Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today we're going to be going over the rules overview for Seventh Continent by Serious Pulp. Really excited. If you haven't actually checked out the solo setup video before this one, be sure to take a look at it in order to understand really where we're at currently. But as you can see, we've landed. My character is H.P. Lovecraft. We've landed on the Seventh Continent. We are cursed, thanks to the Voracious Goddess, by a curse which we need to get rid of. And that is our sole goal, is to find a way to get rid of this curse. We have Fog of War cards around us. These are exploration cards that we're going to be going around trying to resolve and go through the world and explore in order to resolve many checks and action consequences in order to get to our end destination of hopefully getting a curse off of us. The purpose of this video is to go over the rules, although what I'm going to do in order to make this a little less painful for everyone involved is I'm going to go over the rules at a high level, because this purpose is to bridge the gap from the solo setup video to the playthrough. Any specific or consequential or scenario-driven type check or rule or anything along those lines we'll do as we play through it, because it just makes more sense. So for this video anyway, we're going to go over the player aid to really help you guys understand what's on it, what it's about, how the turn order goes, all that kind of stuff. So let's start right at the top with exactly that. Let's talk about this guy right here. This is the player aid. So what you're going to see when you first take a look at the player aid, which thankfully is provided within the box, there's 4 of them. I'm playing solo, so I only need 1. Is a massive list of actions. So you have a whole bunch of actions like moving and snowshoeing through snow, and swimming and going to see something or investigating it, or pathfinding, like exploring, for instance, a Fog of War type terrain. All these kind of things you can do. There's a large majority of different actions. I'm not going to talk to every single one of them or speak to each one of them, but they're all things you can do on the Seventh Continent, and there's a ton of them. But no matter what, you'll be able to do any of them, just depending on what the check is. Well, the question will be is whether you pass it or not. That'll be the real key. So what's going to go ahead and happen is there's a whole bunch of action consequences that will result, as well as resources here. When I do a quick flip to the other side, we have a turn sequence, we have action icons, and action resolution. So let's talk about and finish this side first before we go on. So this is action consequences. So whenever you see these types of icons along the left here, these are going to give you an idea as to how to handle them. So let's talk through them one by one. So we have action consequences. The 3 green X's really just stand for any card, which would come from this massive pile of cards over here. So anything in this pile right here. You would take a card bearing that number from the adventure deck, and it's green by default always, as we talked about in the last video, and it's only gold if no greens are available. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, as I mentioned before. Once you have that, you move on down to the second one. Another action consequence shows that you may add together the number of the card you are to take and the number associated with the pictograph. Example, 159 and a pictograph number of +5 would give 164, so it would allow you to take a higher number. That's something that we're probably not going to see early on in this playthrough, maybe at all, but that's just more of a situational thing we'll talk about when we actually hit it. This one's really important. This one here, the movement symbol with 4 arrows in all directions, so it shows each involved character, of course I'm playing solo, so it only matters for one person, moves his or her figure to the same reachable terrain card. So really what this is going to allow us to do, so for as an action, for instance, say for instance we had multiple of these flipped up cards like this, so we could actually see this side of the continent. They have these little symbols down here in the bottom left. What they basically mean is, as long as there's a whole bunch of them adjacent to each other in a long stream pattern, you can actually travel between them in long distances. So you can choose to basically move your figure to the same reachable terrain card. If there's anything blocking or preventing you from getting from this terrain card, say, to another one revealed over here that has this same icon, then you're not going to be able to make that move. You might be able to make it as far as you can go before you hit that particular border or that particular card that's permanent, whatever it is. But that's just basically saying you do have the ability to move quickly. That's another really cool thing about the games, is speeds things along, because if you want to get from one side of the continent to the other, as long as there's an open path to do so, you can. Then right underneath it, it mentions a banishing process there for the action consequences. So when you see this typical green over to yellow, you're banishing the green card and replacing it with a gold card bearing the same number. So that's always going to be shown the top right-hand side of the card when it gets flipped. So if we happen to see that anytime during the adventure, we banish the green, replace it with a gold of the same number. Similarly, with the next one, it says to, once it's been resolved, of course, discard this exploration card, which is the white one, and replace it with an adventure card that belongs there. So again, exploration cards are these gray-backed cards here. Adventure cards are your green cards right here. So when you see this symbol, that's how you know to basically replace it with an adventure card. The next one here says the active player may either add this card to his or her inventory or give it to another involved character so that he or she adds it to his or her own inventory. So it's basically saying that the active player, whoever's decided upon, of course I'm playing solo, so it's always going to be me, may either add the card to the inventory. So basically I'm always going to be acquiring stuff into my inventory. I'm playing true solo with only one individual. You can, if you want to, play with multiple heroes or multiple characters in this game solo if you want to, but I'm just going to choose to do one for simplicity's sake and just also to get the game moving along at a quicker pace. This one here says, unless otherwise stated, the involved characters must remove a total of X pips. So as chosen by themselves across the values of the dice resting on their items. So let's say hypothetically, and I don't have a good example out right now, but let's just say hypothetically this was an item we had crafted. There typically would be a die which represents the amount of durability it has. It would be sitting up on the top right. Again, this is a bad example because the Situational Journal is a permanent card for me, so just take this with a massive grain of salt because I'm not going to show you something that's revealed yet, or unrevealed I should say. But essentially a crafted or found item will have a durability rating based on the die, and really what you see when you see this particular indication, if it said -2, it would mean every single item that I have across all characters involved would lose 2, so my durability of my item would just drop down to 2. There you go. It just means you're kind of beating up your equipment a little bit faster, and of course it impacts more people. Underneath of that, it says for each red hand card in your hand, which is a state card. So state cards are like really nasty things. So state cards being, like could be an injury or some poison or something along those lines, something bad. You discard one action card from the deck. So really this is going to pop up a lot when you hurt yourself, you do something stupid, or you fail a check and it involves you getting hurt. Then really what's going to do is as these state cards mount into the hand up here on the top, the more of them that come up there, every single time you see this icon come in, we're going to have to constantly keep throwing cards from our pile here into the discard pile. That's making our overall life drop, and that's never a good thing. Okay, so that resolves the action consequences section. The next section of this player aid is the resources section. It's really simplistic, and really you can just understand it by looking at it without reading it even. Just look at the actual icons: wood, bamboo, stone, foliage, liana, I can't even pronounce that for some reason, fire, bone, poison. Now, if you want to understand why these are even important, well, if you look at even our starting tile here, you'll notice in the bottom right, there's a picture of an icon of a stone. So that means, for instance, if we happen to get a card in our hand, let's say it was like a club that had a stone as part of it, or let's say on that card it said that you'd use -1. You exert one less energy from your life deck, essentially, if you happen to have stone nearby. So in other words, if you say you're crafting, like I said, the stone hammer, and it costs 3 action cards, but if there's stone there, then it's -1. So basically, it's just going to help you. The more resources you have towards the items you're crafting, the less cards you're pulling from your massive deck over here, which you don't want to deplete. And that's part of the strategy, is keeping your life at a good level, because once that deck disappears, and then it'll all end up in the discard pile over time. When this depletes completely and it's all over here, you then take everything out, you shuffle the entire thing, and you play it to the discard pile, and the very first card you pull that has a curse on it, you automatically succumb to your curse and you are killed. So it's very vicious, and really what it's doing is it's setting you up to die, really. What you're trying to do is keep your first iteration of your life deck as and retain it and be able to cycle it and stuff like that. So there's an element of not deck building whatsoever in this one, but more so just hand management is a real good way to describe it. Makes it really fun. So anyway, those are your resources. Now we're going to go ahead and flip this over so we can understand the other side of this thing. This is going to help when we get to turn order and action resolution. So right here you can see turn sequence. So you can take in any action, and of course all actions have a little silver white kind of boxed in area there, and then either let another player take his turn. In my case, I'm not letting anybody else take their turn because I'm playing solo, so I get to take every turn, which is awesome, or take another action if all players agree. I hope all the other players agree because there's only one person on this continent for me. So the cool thing is every single time I see one of these white boxed icons, so for instance right here there's one at this mountain peak area here. There's also there's an icon here where we can take an action. Of course, these are exploring off into different parts of the world. This is likely more of an event that's going to occur on this particular plot of land or adventure card. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all pans out in the end. Then there's some action icons. So you got your turn sequence action icons. The first action icon, an action that the active player may take. So in that case, it's always going to be me. The red ones that are bordered, though, are a little more important. It says an action that all involved characters and only them must take, but it's always going to be me in a solo game. But if you're playing with other people, you really have to keep track of that active player because that will come into play. For me, it's just always me, or at least for this playthrough anyway. The related effect may only be applied during an action of this type if the character is involved in it. So that's pretty straightforward. If we see that particular brown kind of symbolism there, the effect may only be applied during an action of this type. And then this one here down below in kind of like a whitish or whited out with some brown edging says this action has already been performed and may not be taken again and from the attached terrain card. So it's kind of like it's been used once, done once, can't be done again. This is simply just letting you know how to basically handle a typical action. So all actions are going to look very much like this. So essentially this, if you look at those particular signposts, remember if we go back to this particular actions list, we can find that signpost right there. It says pathfind or escape. And really at this point, thematically, we'd be pathfinding rather than escaping. Although in certain situations there could be monsters here where maybe we would be escaping. But we'd be pathfinding into this, and that would be our action. There's a cost up here, or default cost of the action. So in this particular case, it shows up in the 0, or I should say in the blue kind of diamond, and it shows as a 0+, meaning that I have the ability to draw as many action cards from my action deck as I want to in order to get the number of successes right to the right of it on the star. Currently that's 0, so that's a fairly easy check and it's just resolved easily. It means I don't have to actually spend anything in order to do such a move. So that's pretty cool. Now, this is the other thing to keep note of. So again, you're always going to have your action to the left. You're going to have your default cost of the action, as I just explained, the minimum number of successes needed to successfully perform the action. So really, as long as you match it or exceed it, you're good to go. Always remember that plus symbol really does matter. So in other words, if it doesn't have the plus symbol, you're locked into only pulling that many, that number of action cards. So if it had just a 2 and not the plus, I could only pull 2 action cards to attempt to do it. Whereas right now, if I was to do this action, I could pull as many blue cards as I need to eventually get to 1 success. The downside being I'm draining my life force trying to succeed at that check. So there's a little bit of a balance there. Of course, once you fail or succeed, it's written in white. If you succeed, black is fail. So in this particular case, black, you don't fail on this one because there is no fail. You're always going to pass. But the pass in this case is to flip this particular card, and then of course you'd move on. Down here below, it says if you ever see a padlock, players must draw the exact number of cards indicated by the action, and unless they choose to apply card effects from their hands and or inventories. So that's the only thing you can do. It's kind of a little limitation there, but that's pretty much it. There's nothing else to, but it's something to keep in mind in terms of the padlock when we see it. The staircase one right next to the action says this action may not be taken unless all characters are involved. Well, that's never going to really be a problem for me because I'm playing solo, so that staircase one's not going to be something I need to worry about in solo play. If you're playing cooperatively with friends, then yes, that comes into play big time. Or you're playing with 2 or more characters is a better way to say it, I should say. Because even playing solo, I could be playing with 2 characters. Below it here, we have kind of like a symbol underneath is saying players may not take the following actions on this terrain card. So that's pretty straightforward. It's going to literally just let you know that certain terrain cards are not, it's not possible to make fires, craft items, or rest. And that just makes sense. You might find a card, for instance, that happens to be open water or something. You can't create a fire on open water. So you're going to have situations like this. They're going to crop up to let you know you can't do certain actions. Then what you're going to do, really this is the most important part. Once you've chosen your action in the game, again, when you're playing solo, for me, it's just going to be me running around doing what I want to do. And of course, I'm going to be asking you guys for help as we run through this. That'll be the fun part, is as I end my videos, I'll kind of leave it up to you guys to let me know what to do next. I think that'll be really fun to get you guys engaged on this. The action resolution here goes through these steps from 1 all the way down to 7. So the very first one says, item. All involved characters may use their items to lower the and of course you lower the durability of each item you use by 1. So again, as we talked about, if I happen to be doing a particular action for something and my actual item card had a ability on it that said, you know, this is what you'll get. Maybe you'll gain an extra star if you use this item. Then you just ensure that you tick down the durability of your item by 1. And that's all that that's saying. That's the first thing you do. Then you move into the cost phase. At the cost phase, you determine the cost of the action. Again, as we talked about, whatever number's in that diamond symbol, you always keep an eye out for that plus and stuff like that. You draw those number of cards shown in the blue diamond. There is some variation there, so it shows the X. It shows minus X and then plus X. So it says as chosen by the player's collective action only. So for me, that's not going to work because when you're playing solo, you can't jig around with the numbers. So for instance, if this said, really what it allows you to do is it kind of allows you to mess around with the numbers on the cards. And I don't have an example of it here in front of me. That's a good one. But essentially, if it was like, I don't know, let me think about this. If there was like a 1 in the blue and a 2 in the gold, you might sit there and say, there's no way I can make that happen. Actually, you know what? We might have to just see it in action. But at the end of the day, the only reason I'm even trying to mention this is just so you are aware. In solo play, it's not going to matter because it's a collective action, and it only allows you to rejig these numbers around and play with them if you happen to have more than one character in play. If you're playing solo, whatever the check says you have to do, the only things you have to basically manipulate it would be your available resources, your items, and stuff like that, and whatever other skills and stuff like that you have. You can't just change the numbers, but when you're playing with multiple other people, you're able to do some number swapping there between the blue and the gold. And all it does really is it just means you knock one down and put one up. That's essentially the idea. So it allows you just to rejig the numbers if you want to take less, cards to hope to get more successes, or take more cards to get less successes or something like that. Then we move on to the B section of the cost. It says draw as many, or I guess we haven't touched on the other two below it. So this just says, again, the cost phase, you can minus off the number of cards you have to draw if the involved characters use card effects from their hands or inventories. That's kind of what I already explained. Again, you can minus more off the cost of your action for each available resource that you have. It's a craft action only. So again, that's what we explained about if we happen to have rocks here, for instance. It'd be easier to make a stone club. It would probably knock off an action to create that club. So you take that into account. Then you go down to B section of that cost area. It says draw as many cards as the action cost. So again, it's going to be straight away. So for instance, this one right here, 005 says we're going to draw 1 action card, but we're allowed to draw more than 1. But there really isn't any reason. It would be really dumb to do that because we only need 0 successes, meaning we're going to pass it with the 1 card anyway. So it's going to force us to use a little bit of effort by pulling 1 card, but we know we're going to pass it, so why would we want to pull any more than just the 1? So basically in the B step there, you just draw as many cards as you want based on the symbol. As long as there's a plus there, you have that option. I would just draw 1 in that case. And again, it says you may draw more if the action is not locked. So again, and then place them face down in front of you. So you're going to go ahead and place those cards in front of you. Then you're going to talk about the result stage. And the result stage, you reveal all the cards that you've drawn during the cost step and count the full stars. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to pull these particular cards one by one. You're going to see them in the playthrough. On the far side on the left, there's going to be stars. Some of them are half stars, some are blank, some don't have borders at all, some are full stars, all kinds of things like that. The idea is you're trying to either find stars on that board, on that kind of panel on the left side, or try to merge them together to create stars, and you'll see more about that when we actually start playing. And of course, you're just doing your totaling up. So if the total is greater than equal to the required number of successes, you succeed. And if it's less, then you fail. Very straightforward. You follow either the white for succeeding or black for failure. Then you go ahead to the skill phase. It says the active player may choose one card, one of those blue cards, from those that are, and these are skill cards, from those that were revealed during the result step, and add it to his or her hand or to another involved character's hand. So I'm playing solo, so for instance, if I decide to try to climb this mountain, I would pull one action card from the deck, and because I only happen to pull one card, I am allowed to take that card and put it instantly into the blue area over here of my hand, and I get to keep that now. It's kind of a thought. The idea behind this whole skill spot where you can choose one is it's almost like you're starting to come up with or imagine, or you're using your own thoughts to kind of help you out and stuff like that. So you'll see what I mean when we actually start playing it, but really it's a really interesting system. And then once you've done that, you go ahead to the discard section. So you're going to discard all the other skills that you didn't take and all the curse cards that were revealed during that result step. If you happen to get any curse cards, are worth 0 stars. So of course you wouldn't get any help there. And then you discard any item that has durability of 0. So again, way up here, if your durability went down to 0, you just do a check, and of course you chuck it at that moment. And then it says consequence is the second last phase. It says, of course, you apply your white section for success, for failure, your black section. If it's more than one character is involved in an action, the active player takes a 100 card. So that, for me, is not going to matter because I'm not going to have more than one character, so that will never be a part of this situation. And then hand size limit, if needed, discard the blue skill and the green cards of your choice until you have your allowed hand size. And hand size always goes back to the reference on the satchel and journal. So in this case, we're right here with the 1 kind of pawn, and it shows the 4 green, 5 blue. We at this point make sure in our hand that we don't have any more cards than what we're allowed to be holding. And that's essentially it in terms of the high level, actions, consequences, resources, crafting, turn sequences, action icons, and action resolution. That's the whole thing. Now, again, obviously, there's going to be a lot of situational stuff we're going to run into as we start playing through the playthrough. So this is where we're going to get into the fun stuff. So obviously, more rules will be further explained, and you'll actually be able to see them in action as we move into the playthrough. So I really hope you guys are excited. I'm super excited. We're finally here. We finally made it. The next videos coming are going to be the actual playthrough of this game. Cannot wait. Hope you'll join me on this adventure on the 7th continent. I can tell you right now, Howard P. Lovecraft absolutely needs your help because he doesn't know what he's doing, and he needs to get this curse off of him right away. So I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thanks again for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.